Good morning, Internet. This is Dustin, author of Red Twilight. Um, Over the last 2 days, I've had two overnight shifts at my job, and yesterday before work, I had a meet and greet that ran for about 8 hours and a book signing that ran for 3. So if I look sick as hell right now, it's because I probably am. But I kind of felt like I needed to do another on philosophy. I was just at work, as I just said, I guess, and I was approached by a woman who was having trouble finding cat food, and I was physically and mentally exhausted. So I decided to turn off my register and help her go find it. I could have just said it's 9/11, but I don't know, I felt like walking, I guess. Trying to regain some level of mental alacrity by moving. As we were walking, she starts asking me who I am. I tell her I'm Dustin Fader. I'm the author of the book Red Twilight. She asked me to go on. Did I go to school? I said, yes, I am a theologist. She looks just stunned and asks, why am I working in Cub Foods if I have that level of education? Because there's no money to be made in theology as far as I know. Theologists basically have two choices of what they can do with themselves. They can become artists, or they can become teachers. Well, we've all heard the term starving artist, which is what I am. And teachers are doing barely better if you look at the average salary for them. So, that was interesting to explain. She takes a minute to think about the two things I just said, and comes to the conclusion that there is a paradox there. I am an author who wrote a book that talks fairly extensively about quantum physics, but yet I am a theologist. So, this must mean that I am a scientist who is faith-driven. No, I'm not a scientist. I'm a theologist. But I do take some interest in science. She goes on from there to ask me, what are my thoughts on Darwinism versus creationism? And in my hazed existence at that point in time, I blurted out, I don't see why they can't both exist in an equal way. If I were a great inventor capable of creating and sustaining the existence of a creature, there's no reason why I couldn't have created my creation in some lesser form and then progressively added onto it to make it a more powerful and more beautiful creature, allowing it more and more of my power with each passing generation, and allowing it to become more and more godlike than animal-like. So creation and evolution could both be true. maybe God didn't create man, maybe God created monkeys. And then he saw that there was some monkey that was just different than the others. It had some tiny spark of intellect that surpassed that of its kin, and that one was chosen to pass on its genetic code to the following generation and make the next generation all have that spark until a mutation occurred, which allowed all of them to become Homo erectus. Homo erectus was chosen to evolve. Then those Homo erectus learned how to dream. The dreamers were allowed to evolve. And then came inventors, then came architects, then came philosophers. And before you knew it, you had a race that was capable of in some way grasping what is a god. And then that race capable of glimpsing at the true nature of this creator, should this creator indeed exist, starts to strive to gain even more of their father's power. We start to delve into genetic research. We start to dive into gene splicing. We discover atomic manipulation. We learn how to use the tiniest particle of energy to build nations. And then we learn how to use that same energy to turn them into salt. We've already done all this. What are we going to do in the next generation? I already did a video about that, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that there. She was truly captivated by this notion. And I wish that I had been just a little more clairsentient, because not a moment after I stopped talking to this woman, another revelation dawns on me. I'm not sure if I have time for this, but I'll try to keep it brief. If you take the time to read through the canon of the Bible, and you forget that this is a document of faith, and instead consider the possibility that this is an epic written by a dozen or more of the greatest minds of the Bronze Age, this could all very well be a way for the truly wise to have spoken to the truly privileged about their thoughts on the nature of existence. When the book of Genesis said, on the first day God created the stars, it didn't want to say God created the stars. It wanted to say that the stars predated you and me. When it says that on the sixth day God created all the beasts of the earth, I'm sorry if I got that out of order, but as I said, I'm really barely here right now. And that was perhaps saying that all life grew side by side. We are in this interconnected web where if any creature failed to exist at any one time, it would have created a chain reaction in the primordial state of our growth that would have caused our entire planet's ecosystem to collapse outright. Then if you talk to historians, you also find that the story of Noah is true in a matter of speaking. The Tower of Babel. That was the other one where if you look at the way that the story is constructed, it looks very similar to one of the parables of Confucius. At one point in time, all men spoke the same language, and they constructed a monolith that they believed would reach into heaven. It probably wasn't much more than 45 feet, to be honest, if it existed. What if the only part of this story that was actually important was we all spoke the same language? Then that means that what the artist really wanted to say is that he was looking at a map, and he saw how the lakes and the oceans in the world as they understood it were equally proportionate in size and shape, which meant he discovered continental drift. That if you had took India and Africa, or rather the provinces thereof, removed the property lines and rotated them, all the parts of the known world would become a circle, surrounded by a second circle of water. That's amazing. That somebody had the clairsentience to look at a map and say, wait, there's a pattern here. All these things are one. Then you have Moses walking through the desert for 40 years. Probably not. He would have had to have been the world's worst navigator. But what if what the artist of this piece of literature really wanted to say is he believed that all men were living in a confined space at one point in time, but then we started to wander. We didn't drift for 40 years, we drifted for 4,000 years. And we walked to every corner of the world. We used the Alaskan land bridge to move to a place that would be forgotten for 5,000 years. And we would change shape and color. We were all of one nationality until we led ourselves to a new world. And then the red man evolved to his environment, and he found himself in a place that was colder or brighter, and his skin grew lighter or darker to make up for the change in their environment. Or the man stopped eating red meat and started eating white meat. Or he lived on water, which turned his skin yellow. This man believed that he had found why different races existed. How come not all men were 6'2", had skin made out of bronze, and hair like sheep's skin? The Bible is an interesting thing in that it tried to explain science. These were not people who were truly driven by God. These were people who were using the words that people around them understood already to explain things that nobody else did. These were scientists. These were philosophers of the Dark Age. They were people who wanted to find out what the nature of existence was. But they needed to use words that everybody around them would understand. So when they couldn't explain the specifics of an event, they said God to fill in the gap. God was dark matter. God was something that we could not see, or was an amount of time that we didn't understand, or was an unstable element in our environment that shaped the way that we saw things. At one point in time, we started using God's names. If there was a shadow that was cast upon the moon, we said that it was Shkal who cast the shadow across the moon. And in order to make that shadow disappear, we would raise our heads and howl. We thought that perhaps the moon would attack the sun, and so the sun became a horse, and the moon became a dog. I'm way over my time limit on this, and I am sick as hell, so I'm going to cut here. I'm not going to bother editing this, so you're going to get the unabridged version of this speech. Good night, Internet.